Your emotions are lying to you. Every single day, your feelings are making decisions that your logical brain would never approve of. And look, I get it. We're told to trust our gut, follow our heart, all that stuff. But here's the thing, that advice is destroying your potential. Today, I want to talk to you about why the most successful people on this planet have learned to do something uncomfortable. They detach emotionally and focus logically. And if you ignore this message, you'll keep making the same mistakes over and over again. But stick with me, because what I'm about to share will change everything. Years ago, I made a decision that cost me everything. I was so caught up in how I felt about a business opportunity that I ignored every red flag. My gut said yes, my emotions screamed go for it, and I lost a small fortune. That failure taught me something I'll never forget. You see, our brains aren't wired for the modern world. We still react like we're running from lions on the savannah. Fear, excitement, anger, these emotions hijack our thinking before logic even gets a chance to show up. And that's the problem. We make choices based on feelings, then spend years dealing with the consequences. The core principle is simple, but hard to accept. Emotional detachment isn't about becoming cold or heartless. It's about creating space between what you feel and what you do. It's about giving your logical brain time to catch up with your emotional brain. Let me explain why this matters more than almost anything else you'll learn. Because once you master this skill, you'll stop sabotaging yourself, you'll make better decisions, and you'll finally start building the life you actually want. Let me paint a picture for you. You wake up in the morning, your alarm goes off, and before your feet even hit the floor, your brain is already spinning. You're thinking about that argument you had yesterday, you're worried about that meeting later. You're stressed about money, about relationships, about whether you're doing enough with your life. And here's what happens next. You make decisions all day long, dozens of them, hundreds of them, what to eat, what to say, how to respond to that email, whether to take that opportunity or play it safe. But here's the problem nobody talks about. Almost none of those decisions are logical. They're emotional. They're reactions. They're your feelings driving the car while your logical brain sits in the back seat wondering where you're going. Some of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You've sent that text message you shouldn't have sent. You've said yes when you meant no. You've bought something you couldn't afford because it felt good in the moment. You've stayed in situations, jobs, relationships, habits that you knew were wrong for you, but leaving felt too scary. I know how this feels because I've lived it. I spent years making emotional decisions and then wondering why my life wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And let me tell you something, it's exhausting. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps getting faster but never takes you anywhere. Here's what I've observed after decades of studying human behavior. We are emotional creatures who occasionally think logically, not the other way around. Our brains evolved to react first and think second. Back when a rustling bush might mean a lion was about to eat you, that made sense. React now, think later, stay alive, but we don't live in that world anymore. Today, that same emotional wiring makes us terrible decision makers. We get angry and say things we regret. We get scared and avoid things that would help us grow. We get excited and jump into situations without thinking them through. We get hurt and build walls that keep out the good along with the bad. And the consequences, they compound. One emotional decision leads to another. That angry email costs you a relationship. That fear-based avoidance costs you an opportunity. That impulsive purchase costs you financial freedom. And before you know it, you're years down a path you never consciously chose. Let me give you an example. I once met a man, brilliant guy, really sharp, who had destroyed 3 businesses. 3. And when I asked him what happened, he kept blaming external factors. His partners, bad timing. But as we talked, the pattern became obvious. Every single failure started with an emotional decision. He'd get excited about an idea and rush in without proper research. He'd get frustrated with someone and push them out instead of working through it. He'd get scared when things got tough and make panic moves instead of strategic ones. His emotions were running his business, and they ran it right into the ground 3 times. Now, I'm not saying emotions are bad. They're not. They're human. They're what make life rich and meaningful. But they're terrible CEOs. You don't want your feelings making your important decisions any more than you'd want a toddler driving your car. Toddlers are wonderful. They're just not great drivers. The funny thing is, we know this deep down. We all know this. How many times have you looked back at something you did and thought, what was I thinking? The answer is simple. You weren't thinking. You were feeling. And you let those feelings take the wheel. So here's the question we need to answer. How do we change this? How do we create space between our emotions and our decisions? How do we learn to respond instead of react? That's what we're going to explore. And trust me, this isn't about becoming some cold, emotionless robot. It's about becoming the person you're actually capable of being. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think emotional detachment means not feeling anything. They think it means suppressing your emotions, pushing them down, pretending they don't exist. That's not what I'm talking about at all. In fact, that approach backfires spectacularly. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They just show up later, usually at the worst possible moment, usually stronger than before. No. What I'm talking about is something different. It's about creating a gap, a tiny space between stimulus and response, between what happens to you and what you do about it. Let me explain it like this. Imagine you're holding a snow globe. You shake it up and everything inside is swirling around. Chaotic. Impossible to see clearly. That's your mind when emotions take over. Now, what happens if you just set the snow globe down and wait? The snow settles, the water clears, you can see everything perfectly. That's emotional detachment. It's not about emptying the snow globe. It's about letting things settle before you act. Here's the aha moment that changed everything for me. Your emotions are information. That's it. They're data points. They're telling you something about how you perceive a situation. But they're not commands. They're not orders you have to follow. They're just information. When you feel angry, your brain is telling you that something feels unfair or threatening. That's useful information. But it doesn't mean you should yell at someone. When you feel scared, your brain is telling you that something feels risky. That's useful information, but it doesn't mean you should run away. When you feel excited, your brain is telling you that something feels promising. Useful information, but it doesn't mean you should jump in without thinking. See the pattern? The emotion gives you information. The logic decides what to do with it. When you get those two in the right order, everything changes. Now, some of you might be thinking, that sounds great in theory, but emotions don't work like that. They just happen. They overwhelm me. I hear you, I really do. And here's what I'll say to that. You're right that emotions happen automatically. You can't stop the initial feeling. Someone insults you and you feel angry. That's automatic. Someone you love leaves and you feel hurt. That's automatic. You face a big challenge and you feel scared. That's automatic. But here's what's not automatic, what you do next. That's a choice. And it's a choice you can train yourself to make better. I've spent my whole career studying people, watching them, analyzing their behavior. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the most successful people I've ever met all share this one skill. They feel their emotions, but they don't let their emotions make their decisions. They pause, they process, they think, then they act. It's not that they feel less than the rest of us. In many cases, they feel more. They're deeply passionate, deeply caring, deeply engaged with life. But they've learned to separate the feeling from the action. Let me share something I learned the hard way. Years ago, someone I trusted betrayed me in business. And I mean, really betrayed me. The kind of thing that makes your blood boil just thinking about it. My first instinct was revenge. I wanted to destroy this person's reputation. I wanted everyone to know what they'd done. I wanted them to hurt the way I was hurting. And you know what? I could have done it. I had the information. I had the platform. I had every justification. But I didn't. Instead, I sat with it. I let the snow globe settle. I asked myself, what does the logical version we want to do here? Not the angry version, not the hurt version. The logical version. And the logical version wanted to move on, to focus energy on building something better instead of tearing something down, to not give this person any more of my time or mental space than they'd already taken. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, and one of the best. That's the mindset shift. It's not about suppressing what you feel. It's about giving yourself the space to choose what you do with it. All right, let's get practical, because understanding this stuff is one thing. Actually doing it is another. Here's the thing. Emotional detachment is a skill. Like any skill, it can be learned. It can be practiced. It can be strengthened. You're not stuck with your current patterns forever. First, you need to build awareness. Most of us walk around on emotional autopilot. Something happens, we react, and we don't even notice the chain of events. So the first step is simply starting to notice. When you feel a strong emotion, pause. Just pause. Don't do anything yet. Just notice what you're feeling and name it. This sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Research shows that the simple act of naming an emotion reduces its intensity. When you say to yourself, I'm feeling angry right now, or I'm feeling scared right now, you create distance between yourself and the feeling. You go from being the emotion to observing the emotion. That's a huge shift. Second, You need to develop your pause muscle. This is the space between stimulus and response. And like any muscle, it gets stronger with you. Start small. When someone says something that triggers you, wait 3 seconds before responding. Just 3 seconds. Count them in your head if you have to. That tiny pause gives your logical brain just enough time to wake up and participate in the conversation. For instance, let's say your partner criticizes something you did. Your emotional brain wants to defend immediately, to attack back, to protect your ego. But if you pause even for a few seconds, you give yourself the chance to respond differently, to ask, is there truth in what they're saying? To respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Third, learn to separate facts from stories. This is huge. When something happens, our brains immediately start telling stories about what it means. Someone doesn't text you back and your brain says, they're ignoring me, they don't care about me, I'm not important to them. But that's not a fact, that's a story. The fact is simply that they haven't texted back. Everything else is interpretation. Everything else is your emotions creating a narrative. When you catch yourself telling a story, stop and identify just the facts. Strip away all the interpretation and emotional colouring. What actually happened, not what does it mean, just what happened. This simple practice will save you from so much unnecessary suffering. Fourth, use your body to change your mind. Here's something fascinating from my years of studying body language. Your physical state directly affects your emotional state. When you're stressed, your body tenses up, your shoulders rise, your jaw clenches, your breathing becomes shallow. But here's the interesting part. It works in reverse too. If you deliberately relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and take slow, deep breaths, your emotional state will follow. Your brain gets signals from your body and adjusts accordingly. So when you feel emotions starting to take over, change your physiology, stand differently, breathe differently, move differently. It sounds almost too simple to work, but it does. Fifth, ask better questions. When emotions run high, we tend to ask terrible questions. Why does this always happen to me? Why are people so terrible? Why can't anything go right? These questions don't help. They just reinforce negative patterns. Instead, train yourself to ask solution-focused questions. What can I control here? What would the best version of me do right now? What's the opportunity hidden in this problem? What will this matter in 5 years? These questions direct your brain from emotional reaction to logical analysis. Let me give you an example of putting this all together. Say you get passed over for a promotion at work. Here's the emotional response. Anger at your boss, resentment toward the person who got it, self-pity about how unfair life is, thoughts of quitting, complain to everyone who listened. Now here's the emotionally detached response. First, name the emotion. I'm feeling disappointed and frustrated. Second, pause before doing anything. Don't send that angry email. Don't march into your boss's office. Just breathe. Third, separate facts from stories. The fact is you didn't get this promotion. The story might be they don't value me or I'll never advance here. But those are interpretations, not facts. Fourth, use your body. Take a walk. Get some air. Let the intensity settle. Fifth, ask better questions. What can I learn from this? What do I need to improve? What's my next strategic move? See the difference. Same situation, completely different experience, completely different outcomes. One more thing I want you to avoid. Don't confuse emotional detachment with emotional avoidance. Some people think they're being logical when really they're just scared of feeling things. They bury themselves in work to avoid relationship problems. They use cynicism as a shield against disappointment. They stay rational as a way to never be vulnerable. That's not what we're talking about here. That's just a different kind of emotional prison. True emotional detachment means you feel things fully and still choose your response wisely. It's not about feeling less, it's about responding better. Now, let me be honest with you. This is hard. I'm not going to stand here and pretend that what I'm describing is easy. It's not. Our emotional patterns are deeply ingrained. They've been building for decades. Since childhood. Since before we had any say in the matter. So when you try to change these patterns, expect resistance, expect to fail, expect to react emotionally when you wished you hadn't. Expect to look back at conversations and think, why didn't I just pause? That's normal. That's part of the process. Here's what I've learned about change. It's not linear. It's messy. You'll have good days where you feel like you've mastered this and bad days where you feel like you're back at square one. The key is to not let the bad days convince you that progress isn't happening. Because it is. Every time you catch yourself reacting emotionally, even if it's after the fact, you're building awareness. Every time you pause, even for a moment, you're strengthening that muscle. Every time you choose response over reaction, you're rewiring your brain. I want to share a story that keeps me going when this stuff feels too hard. I knew a woman once, a business executive, who had what you might call a temper. Actually, that's putting it mildly. She was known for explosive reactions, yelling in meetings, sending scathing emails, burning bridges left and right. And look, she was brilliant, really talented, but her emotional reactivity was destroying her career. She came to one of my seminars, and I'll never forget what she said afterward. She said, I've tried everything. Therapy, meditation, anger management classes, nothing works. I just react before I can think. I told her something I want to tell. You're not broken. You're not unfixable. You're just running on software that was installed before you had any choice in the matter. And software can be updated. It just takes consistent, patient effort. She started small, just focusing on that 3-second pause, just trying to notice her emotions before they drove her behavior. And she failed constantly. For months, she'd catch herself mid-yell and think, there I go again. But here's the thing. She kept going. She kept practicing. And slowly, very slowly, things started to shift. The pause got longer. The reactions got smaller. The space between stimulus and response grew. I saw her again about 2 years later. She told me her team now describes her as thoughtful and measured. Same person, same brain, same emotions underneath, but a completely different relationship with those emotions. If she can do it, you can do it. I genuinely believe that. So let's bring this home. What have we really been talking about today? Not suppressing who you are, not becoming some emotionless machine. We've been talking about freedom. The freedom to choose your response instead of being slave to your reactions. The freedom to make decisions based on what you actually want, not just what you feel in the moment. The freedom to build a life on purpose, not by accident. Here's what I want you to understand. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is almost always filled with emotional decisions, the impulsive choices, the fear-based avoidance, the anger-driven conflicts, the excitement-fueled mistakes. Close that gap, not by feeling less, but by responding better. Imagine yourself 1 year from now. You've practiced it, you've built the muscle. When something difficult happens, you don't explode, you don't panic, you don't spiral, you pause, you process, you respond from a place of logic and intention. How different would your relationships be? Your career, your health, your peace of mind is what's possible. Not overnight, not easily, but absolutely, definitely possible. So here's my challenge to you. Start today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, the next time you feel a strong emotion, pause, name it. Let the snow globe settle. Then choose your response instead of just reacting. That's it. That's the practice. That's simple and that difficult. And remember this, you don't control what happens to you. You don't control what other people do or say. You don't control circumstances or timing or luck, but you control the space between what happens and what you do about it. That space. That's where your entire life is built. Master that space and you master everything that matters. Detach emotionally, focus logically, and watch your whole world change.